We need to talk about Uncle Nearest.
You got the juice now, man.
Yeah. They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's the lyrical sounds of the geezer.
My biggest nitpick before we start all this is that for some reason, whenever something crazy happens, no one ever knows what's going on all of a sudden.
Not on my watch.
When everything was fine and when the money was rolling in, everybody's taking all the meetings about how you do things and how to do things and how they set up things and how they do things. And then all of a sudden, something hits the fan and nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's like, how did this happen? And I understand things can blindside you. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that people take so much credit for stuff when things are going good and none of the responsibility for when it goes bad. Because at what point was somebody going to say, in the middle of signing all these checks and buying all this stuff, was somebody going to say, hey, where is all this money coming from? I know we do good sales, but is it this much? What is the collateral for these loans? And then on the other side of that, where was the person who was getting all this money in loan origination being like, you know, where is all this collateral? When are we going to independently verify? Like, when are we going to go for ourselves and do an audit so that we make sure that we're lending the right amount for the right amount? You know what I mean? Why wasn't anyone checking where the money was coming from? Hi, welcome to OK Blue Juice. Welcome back. Today, it's another weird angle because I'm about to do a video essay. Like I was saying, no one ever knows what's going on. No one verified anything on either side. Now, one side was under the assumption that they hired someone to do that kind of verification. So there's that whole angle where it's a grown person that you put in a position for a job. So you're not assuming they're going to backstab you, but you need to be careful. You need to be careful, especially when it's something like a Black legacy, something that has a lot of things tied up in land ownership. It was just, what were you doing? What was everyone doing with somebody else's money? What was everyone doing with someone else's money? Like, what are you doing? If this was supposed to be something that was for a family and a legacy, you need to be crossing the T's and dotting every I yourself. Like, you get your CFO to dot the I's, and then you come back and dot those I's. Make sure them I's are dotted. Everything's always, 2020 in hindsight, really. Like, when you're a CEO of a business at that scale that was moving that fast, I can only imagine how quickly things were moving for them. And I am giving them grace, honestly. Like, as much as I just said that, I do understand logically how it could happen because you put your trust in people to believe in what you're doing and then things happen. However, objectively speaking, you needed to be more careful. Whatever.
Yeah. They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's the lyrical sounds of the geezer.
The hostile takeover of Uncle Nearest. A quick rundown if you're just hearing about this. Uncle Nearest is a multi-award-winning whiskey brand. They also do bourbon though, because that's how I got introduced though. But besides point, it was founded in 2016 by Fawn Weaver and her husband, and it was named after the legacy of the first credited Black American master distiller of bourbon and whiskey. His name was Nearest Green. He came to light because he was actually tied to um, Jack Daniels. Child, I almost called it Jimmy Dean's. He was tied to them, basically showing the people at Jack Daniels and the Jack Daniels everything there was to distilling whiskey and bourbon. Sorry, I like to give a little media dump in these videos on this channel. If it's still available on Hulu or wherever you can find it, there is a documentary about bourbon, and it's called Neat. It is good. I loved it. But yeah, I would recommend that. Quick recommendation, real fast. Anyway, in 2019, Uncle Nearest, the company, hired the descendant of Nearest Green, Victoria Edie Butler. And now she is the master blender. Uncle Nearest owns multiple assets. The company owns multiple assets right now, mostly in land and real estate, but also in whiskey barrels. Let's put a pin in that. So they are currently in a receivership, unless you didn't know. I mean, I think most people know. If you're here, you know that they're in a receivership. So the receivership started because of a lawsuit request by the creditors, and it's the loan company Farm Credit Mid America. Now, this started in 2025. Girl, I had to sit up. Due to the court ordered judgment in FCMA Farm Credit Mid America favor of after finding that Uncle Nearest has not been paying their bills. Their loan bill, it had racked up to $108 million. Whiskey barrels, which had an inflated valuation. Now let's pause in case you don't know what an inflated valuation is. Inflated meaning a ballooned or, exaggerated valuation, meaning the amount that the whiskey barrels are probably valued at, and valued probably mean like what you could sell them for in the long run, or how much they would make for the company in total, their valuation. And it seems as though that was all an inflated number. So somebody was exaggerating in the books the whiskey barrels. So all items were signed by Michael Senzaki. Am I saying that right? He has been the CFO since 2018. Fawn Weaver woke up one morning in summer of 2026, and this is a couple weeks ago, to find out that they had locked her out of her own account. So she found out her administrative access had been denied. She had been fired from her own company behind her own back. Now, the receiver of Uncle Nearest is pointing the finger at FCMA, and FCMA is pointing fingers back at Uncle Nearest, the company. And both of them are right now going back and forth. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. So whose fault is it? And how did this happen? First, in case you were wondering, what is a receivership? I said it's the person or entity that is appointed most times by the court, other times by the creditor of the secured loans, to collect and manage a company's assets and earnings because they defaulted on loan payments. In case you didn't know what a secured loan is, most of you probably do know what a secured loan is, but a secured loan is some sort of loan that is tied to collateral. Anybody who does small business, you probably, if you got your own loans and stuff, they most likely ask you for some sort of collateral. A lot of people put up their house. Some people put up, I don't know, any other kind of assets that you might have, like a condo somewhere. It has to be something of ownership that is equal or greater to the value of what you're asking for. That's what it is at most times. Now, at her level of business, sometimes that's why the valuations are so important, because they're counting on that valuation to, basically offset this secured loan, so that in case something like this happens, right, where you have a default on the loan at this level of millions of dollars, they can go snatch up that other stuff and clear that payment. That's the whole reason why secured loans and verifying the collateral is important. And that's why it's crazy to me that it wasn't done, but loans kept getting released to the company with no actual verification, third party independent verification from the company doing the loan. Even on a regular level of regular people's lives, when people go get a loan for a house, the bank is essentially holding your house hostage as collateral, right? But that's their collateral. It's technically a secured note. Your mortgage is a secured loan. The collateral is the house, because if you don't pay, they're gonna come take that house. But in the case of maybe you have a house and you went to buy a second house and you put your first house up as the collateral for the second house, that would only be accepted if the payments were such that the other house is like paid for. In most times, I'm not going to speak in absolutes, but in most times, a secured loan, like I said, it needs to be something that can cover the other thing you're asking for, like the amount you're asking for. And so I bring up the two houses because the bank is going to make sure that that house has enough equity on it, or that you own the house outright, so that it can even be an option to be collateral. They will verify that themselves. If you like I said, had a business and you like wanted to buy another property and you wanted to use your house as collateral for the other property, it needs to be most likely, I feel confident enough to say they prefer a free and clear house. So either a house with a large pool of equity, like you have just a few years of payments left, but it's basically a paid for house, or a paid for house. And it needs to be a house of value, like location, or just the house itself. Maybe it's a historic building. And even though sometimes, I'm not going to get into the weeds of this shit, but anyway, so that's why even regular people life, the bank or whoever, they double check, they do their due diligence, do a little their own independent audit of the said collateral. So my question is, what happened to checking the whiskey barrels? How are you going to find out there isn't enough whiskey barrels to match what was inflated on the statements after you've given the money? Who signed off on this stuff? Who is signing off at a regular bank? At a regular bank, you would get fired for something like this. I don't want to speak out of turn, but like these are serious things. For you to sign off on this amount of money, any amount of money, and especially when it has to do with a company, there is a lot of pressure. The signer on the money accounts of businesses, there's a lot of pressure on you to be doing things exactly to the T. Like, and one of those things when you are doing the lending to a company, you need to be checking and checking, because you sign off on something that somebody can't pay and then they default and then y'all have to go to court. I went on a tangent, but let's get back to the topic. Uncle Nearest, it would have been the real estate, or in this case, the Hinge Point inventory of whiskey barrels. The creditor was Farm Credit of Mid America, like I said earlier. And in the case of Uncle Nearest, the receiver, his name is Philip Young Jr. They're supposed to take possession of, sell, liquidate, and do whatever else they have to do for Uncle Nearest, the company, in order to settle these debts. Now, like, if it was all cut and dry, Philip Young would have came in, collected those whiskey barrels, sold them off, called it a day. But as they are saying, there isn't enough whiskey barrels and the loans have ballooned out of control. So the other kicker about this is that Farm Credit, or FCMA, I'm just going to say that because that name is way too long. Now, FCMA is literally suing everybody. They're suing Uncle Nearest, they're suing Fawn and Keith Reaver in their capacities of the company, and they're suing the distillery that was holding the whiskey barrels. The receiver is doing the whole company, though. That's the thing. The receiver has complete say so over the entire company right now. This is not a true transfer of hands. It's basically like when a store is going out of business, they fired the manager, appointed somebody else, said, come in here, get rid of all this stuff, get what we can get from this, and parcel this up or whatever. Like, do what you have to do with this afterwards, which is crazy. It's crazy to think about, but that's what happens. So he's also the whistleblower to all the creditors of Uncle Nearest. This is the Philip Young Jr. He's a whistleblower to all the creditors because he's the court-appointed receiver. Sometimes when you have a receivership, the receiver can be appointed by the party in which you owe money. They could, appoint a receiver to make sure all the stuff is handled properly. But in this case, FCMA went to court and asked for a receiver, so the receiver was appointed by the court. So if privately appointed by the FCMA, Philip Young Jr. would have only had to report to them, but because it's court appointed, they report now to all of Uncle Nearest companies, debtors. Currently, Philip G. Young Jr., that's a long ass name. I'm going to just say the receiver, okay? The receiver is attempting to sell off some of the real estate Uncle Nearest owns in order to collect the money in arrears. And what kind of real estate did Uncle Nearest have? A lot of land. It was over 100 acres of land, including a Martha's Vineyard house, which is reportedly finalizing for sale to the Calland family. Now, I'm actually kind of confused about this part. I don't know if they've bought the house or not. Like, they're saying that the sale is being finalized, but Fawn Weaver petitioned the stay basically to kind of make it so that they can't finalize the stay on the property and they want like some more time. So I don't know what's going to happen with that house, but the receiver is also stating that the company is insolvent, meaning that it has way more liabilities than assets. This is hurting my feelings just talking about it. Like, I wrote all this out and I can barely read it because even reading it out loud feels like, God damn. But they don't have enough assets to cover these liabilities because the bill to FCMA is apparently over $160 million, or the bill in general to all their creditors is $160 million. After operation losses, while decreased, are still pretty large at $350,000 a month. Now, apparently, they were hemorrhaging like $1 million plus every month, and now because of the receivership, after the receivership, they said it's gone down to $350,000 a month. So I'd like to make a note here that I do have conflicting information because one article said it was $350,000, but then the receivership's actual note said $100,000. So I'm not sure where the $350,000 came from, except that they also included legal fees because the receiver did not include legal fees when they quoted that they got operational losses to under $100,000 a month. Plus, sales and brand reputation are reportedly tanking. Now, obviously, because the first thing I thought when I heard that Fawn Weaver had been removed and Uncle Nearest is in a receivership, the first thing I said was, well, I'm not buying anything anymore. If y'all gonna come take this company, you're gonna take a shell. It makes it kind of messed up, but that's how the public reacts when you bought into something because of a founder and because of a legacy, and then the legacy itself is threatened to be non-existent. People aren't going to want to support it anymore. So all of this press, like when people say all press is good press, no, it is not. And this is case number one because their sales and stuff have been tanking, they said. It could also be because people just don't have the money to buy liquor like they used to. The receiver says they cannot live on operating alone, meaning the company's not doing nothing by making sales. They might have to sell some stuff. And they also noticed that investigations were important and ongoing into the misconduct behind how this all happened. The receiver has said that there might be merit to founder Fawn Weaver's claims, saying that, a lot of unscrupulous behavior was happening with all this other things between the company and the loans and the drawdowns, et cetera, alleged. But there's no hard stamp on anything yet. They said investigation is still needed. More investigation and more proof and more documentation is still needed, but they're having a hard time with that. Put a pin in that. We'll be right back. FCMA says they want the receivership to hold because they cannot trust that the money will come to them if they take control of their company back, as in the Weavers. If they take control of Uncle Nearest again, they think that they'll shut down and disappear and they won't pay their bill. And I was like, this is to me, I was like, all right, that's out of line because you're talking about somebody who has a very long, steady career in this kind of business. And it would be kind of hard for her and her husband to just shut down and disappear. Like they have a lot of angel investors when they started this. And so there's a lot of people they have to answer to still. Like they might not answer to the public, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that they have to and been had to answer to. And I don't think it's possible for someone of their profile to just disappear, close the business and disappear like it was a mom and pop shop in the night. Like Farm Credit, who do you think you are talking to? Plus, they loaned $3.8 million more dollars to their hefty bill to cover payroll, vendors, and other essential costs, which I think is stupid. But I get it. Okay, I get it, but I don't. Like, just sell the damn whiskey barrels and call it a day. Why are you giving them more money on top of the money you said that they couldn't even afford to pay you? And they're acting like it's so that the company can stay open and operate and give us our money. And it's like, at this point, you're operating at a loss. Why are you putting more money on the bill that they owe you? Because if you're saying the receivership is saying that the company's insolvent, the court agreed with them. You, the people who sued and asked for the receivership in the first place, are trying to insinuate that the company is insolvent, and the founders are so untrustworthy that they might shut down and escape in the middle of the night. Yet you're willing to pump in $3.8 million. And I don't know if this is a real thing you can do at this point, but like restructuring ownership, they're going to have to get some sort of big dividend kind of situation. Maybe that would be better. But again, you're operating at a loss. The receivership is really doing the fastest thing, which is starting to parcel off pieces of the business. I just think it was kind of dumb. I feel like it was just another way for them to like get more money. Like they're pumping $3.8 million so that they can keep payroll lights on. Give me a break. Because, first of all, that's something that receivership needed to be worried about. So the receiver is supposed to be taking control of all this stuff, meaning they need to figure out how to get payroll paid without taking more money. You're never gonna pay this off if you keep adding money to the bill. Okay, whatever. Founder Fawn Weaver keeps trying to file for bankruptcy, Chapter 11, which would allow the sale of assets to pay debts and give the buyer ability to be free of the legal or financial stipulations tied to said assets. Or they can use Chapter 11 bankruptcy to basically reduce the debt or figure out how they can reduce the debt, like maybe come up with like a settlement, so meet somewhere in the middle. But in case it's not reduced, you can restructure the debt or you can refinance the debt. And refinancing the debt, I feel at their level, it might actually be very helpful because I don't know what the percentage on the loans was.
I didn't go to fucking school for math.
Actually, that's something I should have looked up. If I find out, I'll put it here. So Chapter 11 bankruptcy for in this case is not a bad idea. And honestly, maybe it could have been done sooner and it could have perhaps avoided the receivership. But that filing of Chapter 11 was basically contested by the receiver. And I saw a lot of discourse about people being really angry about that. But just to clear something up, she can't do that no more. I know we all want Uncle Nearest to work out, but let's be fucking serious. It's already in a receivership. You can't come up out the nowhere and be like, okay, now I'm ready to do bankruptcy. It's too late. Someone else is holding the ownership of the business right now. You have a middleman parceling off pieces of the business. Because, like I said earlier, receivership is when somebody comes in and they basically take domain over everything. Like all those operational things, any kind of administrative leadership business, because they have to get everything in order for all these debtors. So one of those things would be whether the receiver decides to do Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so it's like, I know you got enough money for a lawyer, and I want to know if the lawyer said to do this, maybe it's so that they can like throw a monkey wrench in it. I don't know tactics. Somebody who's in law, talk to me. In what scenario would it be a smart decision for someone who has been removed from an executive chair under a receivership and put in for a bankruptcy, a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or maybe any bankruptcy? Is there a legal like storyline? Is there a legal like play at hand? In your speculation, of course. We're all talking in speculations because we don't know what's going on. No, I mean somebody does. I don't. Anyway, before all this though, the receiver had also worked to expand what fell under the umbrella of their control, most likely because they were saying like, I need control over all the assets. I need to figure out what's going on so I can get all the books in order. To me, that felt really, I know it's kind of part of it, but when you start expanding what you have control over, it just hits me the wrong way. This is making my back crunch. FCMA is suing, which they want all of Uncle Nearest, the entire company, not just the company that, is holding the distillery. And in tandem, the receiver is finding all these different transactions for multiple different companies, and they don't feel like something nefarious is going on, but they do realize that things might be intermingled unless they have brain to go and look and see if things are intermingling with each other. For example, they have companies where the receiver believes that the Weavers were using the outside companies to move money around when it was needed for certain things. So if Uncle Nearest, like the distillery, needed something, they'd pull money from somewhere and fund the something. And so while it's not nefarious, there isn't a direct notage, so the receiver says. So Founder Fawn had to write an email full of actual documentation, lots of documentation, where she was basically defending herself, saying that the receiver was trying to say that she had all these assets and it was to personally enrich her and her husband. And she was just basically proving that every single dollar that you see coming into the account went to the business, is what she put, a whole statement accounting for all the money that she had seen, flowing through or she had signed off on. So she sent that email out to everybody because she wanted to clear her name and basically prove her character, basically being like, I wasn't doing anything shady. So she also admitted that she'd been advised to do a Chapter 11 bankruptcy before everything hit the fan, but she like Umar Johnson her way right out of that. She was just like, no, I'm not doing that, because she said she was thinking about the bigger picture, how she was making this a legacy thing for the actual Uncle Nearest family, aka the master mixer. Master mixer? The master blender. Excuse me. That's the thing though. I understand the mistrust of it when you still think there's a way, but given the magnitude of what was happening, what do you think you would have done? What do you all, I'm asking y'all, what do y'all think you would have done given the magnitude of what's happened? Say you are the Weavers. This is happening to you, but reverse it before the receivership came. The business is now in trouble. You just found out that a bunch of files is missing by accounting from 2018. Taxes haven't been paid. And now you have a swell up credit line, loans that you never even seen, tied to whiskey barrels for way more than you know they're worth. And to add to that point, when looking at the documents that FCMA put in for suing or taking them to court, I don't know what to call it, I don't know if it's suing, but they also were saying that in the security agreement that was written up in 2022 for all these loans that have defaulted, every single thing they own was tied up as collateral. The majority of it was supposed to be whiskey barrels, but besides that, there was literally down to the trademark and design of Uncle Nearest was put in this agreement for sale, basically. I mean, not for sale, for collateral. This is crazy to me that every single thing, down to, I mean, everything. Oh my God. What would you have done? Would you risk, what's it called? Would you have risked going into a receivership? Like if you knew shit was getting rocky, would you have risked going into a receivership, or would you have quickly filed for that bankruptcy, that Chapter 11, to try to restructure some of that debt, to try to maybe figure out how you were going to pay, who maybe you need to give a little part equity to so you can like reduce some of the debt? Like what would you have done? Somebody tell me. Because I mean, it's actually a very heavy decision. And like in hindsight, we can all say coulda, woulda, shoulda. But when faced with such a big decision from something that you like created and you're trying to build, quote unquote, for this family, what would you have done? I just wish there had been more oversight, much, much, much more oversight, and much earlier. Just like a tighter ship all around, a tighter ship, especially when land and legacy are involved. So right now, the only thing protecting Uncle Nearest's legacy is the courts, quote unquote. And this is where the drama is, because the receiver has been filing things that essentially call for the secured creditor's acknowledgement of possible misconduct. This is where we go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, because this might help the company in the long run, not necessarily Fawn and her husband. If they have like any personal lawsuits tied up in this has nothing to do with them. But the company of Uncle Nearest, they might be able to work out how much debt they actually owe to FCMA, the main creditor that started all this. They might be able to work something out with them and the court, depending on what the court finds when you get into the weeds of all of these missing documents and valuations and whatnot. So it might give the courts a reason to hear a case that would reduce what Uncle Nearest owes FCMA in the long run, or what FCMA can even collect. I should say that's the better way to put it. Not so much what they owe, because what they owe is what they owe, but how much can they actually collect because of possible negligence. So that might be good news for Uncle Nearest right there. So the receiver alleges that there's court documents that prove that FCMA blatantly ignored a lot of things that could have, or protocols that could have lessened or mitigated altogether their losses. And FCMA said, nah, that was all you. And back and forth they are going, right? But one person is still in the middle of this back and forth. Michael Senzaki, hired in 2018 as CEO. This is where the studies get murky. This is what I have. Hired in 2018 as CFO, his duties were to protect the financial assets of Uncle Nearest. In short, compliance. I'm reading you CFO duties. right? Ensure compliance with regulators, handle the books, chief financial planner for the company, track cash flows, regularly analyzing the company's financial health, and above all, report accurate information to creditors, vendors, and everybody else, like executives, shareholders, or stakeholders, whatever. But basically, to tell people what's actually happening money wise. That was his whole job. And what everything is saying is that he didn't do that. Also, he needs to be reporting stuff to the government this way. He works in tandem with obviously the accountants, and the whole financial team, but he is the big dog. He's the head cheese. So say he didn't do anything, right? Because we don't know. We have no proof. Say he didn't do anything. Somebody in your department did because y'all are in charge of the money. Y'all are in charge of the books. So if somebody else inflated that valuation, like if your inventory have been messed up from there, nobody checked it, then that's what Farm Credit Mid America is trying to say. Like that was all y'all. That was internal. That was your fault. But then it's like there's the other part that even if they did make that mistake, when you said you was going to give them millions of dollars, you needed to have somebody over there checking it for yourself. Independent auditors exist for this exact reason, so that a third party can come in with unbiased, no ties to either side. They're not working directly for, they're just contracted by somebody to go in, objectively verify what's actually going on, really see if the valuations match up to what's going on. Are they undervalued? Are they overvalued? Are they at value? Like whatever. He's supposed to be doing all this. Michael Senzaki was supposed to be helping in this matter, but however, it was later found that the company has not filed taxes since 2018, had not had a single independent audit to confirm the valuation of their assets, address any discrepancies in the books, or verify inventory. Plus, all the financial records before 2024 disappeared. They've been deleted. There are no financial records before the year 2024. Mind you, like I said, they have been in business since 2016. There's no financial paperwork. No paperwork. There's no paperwork. And yet FCMA still gave them money. They continue to pump millions of dollars into a company with no paper trail. And yet you let it go this far just to take them to court and act like, I can't believe they didn't have any money. It's like, you should have known that. You should have known what the situation was in order to pump that kind of money in. All right, I'm beating a dead horse. FCMA decided to continue to pump millions of dollars into this company, and Fawn and Keith continue to acquire more projects under the business, signing checks with money they probably thought was coming from operations, but never stopped to check.
You got the juice now, man.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with this right now. My investigation goes further. I need to figure out what's going on with these. Somebody's got a copy of these books. Ain't no way. Like, they have other creditors. I'm sure the court's going through all this, right? These are professionals. They've been at it. But from my living room, I'm just like, I'm sure the courts have some sort of documents that'll get released eventually. But like, you there's no way they were operating with no financial paperwork for this long, with at the scale, in order to buy the land. In order to buy the land, what do they come with? Cash in a bag? Like, where are the statements? Like, obviously the person deleted them before he disappeared. You look up Michael Senzaki. I know we all looked him up. Everything's private. His LinkedIn says he's still working motherfucking Uncle Nearest. So like, there's a lot going on with this, and I'm hoping it gets resolved in a good way. Like, the best case scenario is that they liquidate most of their assets and they have to start from scratch, but the company stays intact. The family gets to keep the company, and Fawn and Keith Weaver perhaps reevaluate their role within the company. Like, maybe it was a case of flying too high to the sun. Like, things were too good to be true because they were. You know what I mean? Like, again, growing big. She said I saw a quote by her somewhere. It was actually a really good quote, and it's just kind of ironic right now, but it was like, essentially, I'm paraphrasing. She said she wasn't going to try to be small time in it. She wasn't trying to one hoof it. She wanted to explode. She wanted this company to explode onto the scene. She wanted to make it a behemoth, something, and then pass it off to the Uncle Nearest family. And my question is, okay, so what were you doing with someone else's money? If this was for someone else, what were you doing with someone else's money? Why, again, like I said in the very beginning, why weren't you double checking the double check and the double check? Again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but this is more so for anyone else getting in business. It's wonderful to have aspirations, but like I've always said, there is a plague in the finance and business world about this being a behemoth, growing big and especially growing fast, but mostly growing big. Everyone doesn't have to be the biggest person in the world. Every business does not have to keep growing and growing and growing like a fucking tumor. Like, you don't have to just bubble and expand over everything. You don't. Now, in this case, it kind of makes sense because it's bourbon. It's something that is distinctly, you can only make bourbon in America because of how it's called and the processes and everything. You'll find that out if you watch Neat, the documentary. I'm plugging that thing like I made it. It's just really good. It's a special thing. It's like champagne. It can only come from Champagne, France. This bourbon is distinctly an American spirit, and it does have the potential to go all across the world and reach all these corners. That is something that I find naturally it's gonna get big naturally. Something like liquor, things that bring people together in terms of like joy or sadness or any kind of emotions like that. Those are things that naturally swell with the human population. It just does. That's just what it does. So there was an inevitability to the growth of Uncle Nearest, and the fact that it has such a good story, and the fact that it had the potential to be this really reclaimant a reclaimed legacy of bourbon. This is such a big thing that we're all watching under the scope of one business and a misstep of some founders who were so much enjoying the bigness, they didn't realize that they needed to take a step back and see what wait. Where is all this bigness coming from? Not because they didn't deserve it, not because it's impossible, but just because of timelines, because of the fact that you know your company, you know the operations, you know what you're capable of in the moment. So when you're starting to get things left and right and money's disappearing, you didn't even know the money was disappearing, allegedly. It becomes like a really sad situation overall. And I'm always saying this about companies, like, but I'd be sad because I'm usually talking about a company that I've seen somebody build. Like, I'm watching it grow. Like, last time it was Pat McGrath. Now it's this one. Like, Uncle Nearest was just something that started to be people's comfort drink. You know, people were really starting to discover it. It was appearing on the blogs and all this. And it's just sad to watch somebody's legacy crumble in a mess of press. And I'm hoping there's a way to recover this. I'm hoping, honestly, that the receiver, even though they blocked it, because like I said, they're basically saying, this isn't your job anymore. Stop stepping on my toes. Hopefully they'll turn around and maybe do the Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And if you guys are in law or bankruptcy law or corporate law, let me know your opinion about that. Like, is Chapter 11 really the smartest kind of bankruptcy to do? I know reading it is the most practical bankruptcy for them, but is it really, like, in real practice, like, the most feasible or the most, like, is that the best option in general? I would like to know. So if anybody out there knows or just has an opinion, I'm sharing my opinion. So share your opinion about this in the comment below, because gosh, I'm so tired of seeing these businesses get caught up. You either getting bought up or caught up. It's just, once you start to get big, I don't know, you got to watch twice as hard. Especially, I'm gonna say tin hat, especially because they had so much land, y'all. They had a lot of land. I don't gotta say too much. Okay, so thanks for watching. Gosh, it took me a really long time to do this video. She's not here.
You got the juice now, man.
Yeah. They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's the lyrical sounds of the geezer.